So we're ready to start working on the website. So a smart place to start would be take the contents of the HTML website that you did and make a copy of it. So I'm just going to click and drag with the Option key held down, and I want this over here in my case. And then I am going to give this a different name here. And I'm just going to call this CSS site, even though it's going to be more than that. But that gives us a good starting place. So now over here I have a copy of what I did before. Here I have this new one. And then my job is just to go into Dreamweaver and point it to that site. And since I have videos on setting up the sites, I won't cover that. Okay, so Dreamweaver is now pointing at this folder. And if I double click on the index page, we can see that we're right back to where we left off before. And once again, we'll use the W3 schools as a reference. So if I come over here and click on Learn CSS, and definitely read through the home and the introduction where it tells you what CSS is. It's probably the best updating to the web. You know, took place quite a few years ago, but before then it just kind of looked like a green screen. And then when we got better screens, we realized that HTML was not the way to go to style to make our websites look better. So there are a couple different ways that you can write CSS. And right here on this page under How To, you can see you can write your CSS as an inline style. For the most part, that's the least effective way to go. You can have an internal style sheet, which means that the styles would be written up in the head of your document, and you can do what's generally considered to be the best way to go, and that's what we're going to do, is an external style sheet. So what happens is you point to this sheet, but what's nice is you only have to write the code once. Even if your website has 100 pages on it, all you have to do is point to it, and you can say this page is what tells my headers what to look like, tells my background what to look like, and so on and so on. And under syntax is what we're really going to be concerned about right now, is how do you actually write CSS? How does it know what to do? So typically, and as we get further in this, you'll see that there's always different ways to do things and more advanced ways to do things. But we're going to start out where we write, where our selector is an existing HTML entity that we already know about, like an H1 or like a P, a paragraph tag. And so what we're saying is that an H1, any H1 that's on our document should be colored this color, and the font size should be this size. So back in Dreamweaver, let's go ahead and create our first CSS page. So we're going to go up to File, New, and this time the document type we're going to change to CSS, and then we're going to click on Create. And you can see really there is no big deal about a CSS document. It starts with this char set that just says what type of keyboarding, what kind of characters it's based on. Tells you here in the comments that it's a CSS document, but there's really nothing special about it. What gets special is what we add to it. So what I like to do when I first set up CSS is write something that's going to be super obvious as to whether it worked or not. And notice I'm going to click over here back to index. And I mentioned earlier we were going to write for HTML entities that we are aware of, like the body tag, like an H1 tag. And the king of all of them really is the body tag, right? Because that encompasses all the visual elements of the page. So let's go ahead, and working with that syntax that we saw, we're going to type out the word body, and then we're going to hit a space. We're going to shift and hit that key that gives us the curly bracket, and then you can see that because Dreamweaver knows that it's CSS, it's already given us some hints, like anticipating what we might want to write. We're going to, now the spaces, just like in HTML, don't matter. You could have this all chunked, all stacked together, all sloppily, but here's how we're going to write it. We're going to write the tag that we're trying to get, or the element that we're trying to get. We're going to put in this first curly bracket. We're going to hit return, and then we are going to put in what we are after. Now, you just kind of have to, do a lot of reading on this to find out what things are available. After a while, you can start taking some guesses, especially with the code hinting here. So background hyphen color is one of them, and I highly suggest that rather than you finishing typing anything, you let Dreamweaver give you a suggestion and then you double click on it. That way you don't have to worry about, did I spell something wrong? And then we're going to put in the color, and the way that we're putting in colors is with hexadecimal. I wrote those down earlier on a document, so I can go over here, copy, go back to Dreamweaver, paste that in. Now it always finishes with the semicolon, and then we can go ahead, hit return, and then do a backspace, and then put in that finishing curly bracket. Now we can have more than one thing inside these curly brackets, but this is a good visual way to know this is where it starts, this is where it ends, this is the stuff in between. So if you have problems, you can go back, you can look in here, did I put the semicolon? Did I finish it off with a or the colon here, semicolon here? Not sure why the space ended up there, but that's better. Okay, so let's try this out. Now, first thing we want to do is save this. So we're going to go File, Save As. Now, it's going to be very important that you use the same naming that I do. Just pretend that we're working as a team, because really that's what we're going to do. Is you're going to use my style sheet and you're also going to use your own. So it's important that when we start, you'll see later on there's opportunities for made-up names. It's going to be important that we stick with the same made-up names, and also that we name our style sheet the same thing. So we're going to go Save As, and we're going to save this as main. That's a pretty typical name for your main style sheet. In other words, the style sheet that affects every page or most of the pages. Some very complex websites will have 3, 4, maybe even 100 different style sheets, but it's very common to just see one style sheet that takes care of everything. So we are going to then make a folder for this, as we have been, to keep everything organized. You won't be able to see where my mouse is going. It's going to go off screen, but I'm clicking on the new folder button down here, and then we're going to call this _ styles. Click create. Now that that's named, we can go ahead, we can save it. Then we click over here on our index page to go back. We can go to, like, say for example, refresh it. We might be expecting the background to change, but it's not going to, because we didn't write the style right inside of our HTML like a lot of the examples you might be playing around with on the W3 sites. So this page has no idea that that style sheet exists. So we need to take care of that, and that's something that goes in the head. Right now we only have just this one thing in the head, so we're going to go ahead and add another that tells it where and what our style sheet is. Okay, so I made room for that just under the title. I'm going to start out with that opening caret. Let's see, it doesn't recognize that I'm in there. There we go. And what we want to start with is a link. We're linking to an external page. As soon as I hit the space bar, I'm going to get some options here, and it's going to be the href like we've seen before with images. And then inside of there is where we tell it where to go. Now, keep in mind that whole thing of going in and out of folders. So this index page is right here at the first level inside of our main folder. We need to tell it to go down into this folder and then pick that file. So to tell it to go into a folder, we just start with the folder name, _styles. Then we do the /, and then we tell it the name of the folder, or the file. Sorry, the file is main.css. That's what goes inside of there. Then as soon as we get outside of that closing quotation, we hit the space bar again. Dreamweaver is going to give us some hints, and what we're looking for is REL for relation, and that's just saying what this page is, and we want style sheet. And again, let Dreamweaver finish typing for you if you can. We move on with another space and then type, and that is text.cs or text/css. And then the last one here is media, and that tells us what the style sheet is for. And our option here that we want is screen. And for some reason, it didn't put in that closing quotation mark, which is good that you guys know what you're doing and that that stuff goes there just in case Dreamweaver lets you down like that. And then just remember that you need that closing caret. And just FYI, the reason screen here is you can also set up style sheets that would dictate how an image would print. So you could use one typeface on screen and then set up a CSS style sheet that would dictate how, if someone printed your object, what typefaces it might use to print it. So now it may either happen automatically or you may have to go up here and refresh, but what you should see is a color change on your page. If you're not getting that, no sense going any further. Figure out what you did wrong. So typical errors would be, missing any of the syntax in here, the closing bracket and so on. Misnaming the file, misnaming the misnaming the folder, misnaming the file, and so on. So that is our first step, is to get that style sheet linked and working. Speaking of which, let's bring up another page. So I'll go into Pages. I'll double click on the Favorites page. We'll bring that up and we'll see that it's not styled. And that's the similar reason. It has no idea what it's looking for, or has no idea that that page is out there. So once again, we'll do the same thing, go into the head, and what we have to be aware of this time is that we now have to come up out of a folder and then down into a folder. If you remember from before when we were coding the pages, we have to do a ... /, which means come on up out of here, and then once you're here, do this, which happens to be go down into another folder and find a file in there called main.css. And as you can see, it's taken effect on that page. And then you would do the same to the third page. So let's look at another item that we can knock off of the grade sheet here. We'll start with this font stack that starts with Verdana, and we'll talk about two important concepts dealing with that. So back in Dreamweaver, we're going to make sure that we have our CSS page. Now, I suggest that what you do is once you get going, once you have the CSS page named, close it up here. I've seen some weird things happen that it seems like the program, and maybe they fixed this, but it used to be in the past, it would almost let you write CSS in like a ghost area if you choose this versus this. It shouldn't be that way. So, but anyway, from now on, we'll work with that closed, and we'll just click on main CSS to go into the CSS right here. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to come in here and we're going to write this for the body, and I'll explain why in a minute, but let's first tackle the topic of font stacks. So the selector that we want is font family, and we want to close that off with our colon. And these right here are examples of font stacks. Now, we may not have the exact one that we want in here as a default. In fact, it doesn't look like it is in here. But here's an important concept to understand. In general web design, you don't know that the end user has the font that you want on their machine. Now, there has been a lot of recent improvements, workarounds on that. But this is the most traditional one on a simple website, is you just first start out by stating what font you want to show on your website. But then you have to understand that the person may not have it. So what you do is you follow that by a comma, and then you indicate a second and even a third choice. You want to finish out the font stack with just a generic saying, okay, if you have Verdana, that's what I want you to use. It looks like this. If not, Geneva looks pretty similar. And geez, if at that point, at least make sure that it's a sans serif, meaning this kind of plain styled font, as opposed to a serif font that looks more like this, that has the embellishments on it. In the next video, I'll tell you why.